Well, thank you, Craig. That was just such an absolutely warm welcome. Apparently, it's the only thing that's warm here. I first of all want to bring greetings from the City of Burnaby, my city, and from Metro Vancouver on behalf of all of the directors and the staff at Metro Vancouver. I want to bring special greetings, Mr. Minister and Mr. Mayor, on behalf of all of my colleagues. It is a wonderful opportunity to be here in Saskatchewan, in Regina. I was assigned this task to leave right after the election to come here, and when they assigned it to me, they told me I was going to Regina, Mexico. And I thought that was such a cute name, you know, as that we had a city named Regina right here in Canada. You can imagine my surprise when I arrived here Sunday and looked out the window at Saskatchewan. It is lovely, just as nice as Mexico. And so I'm thrilled to be here to be able to talk to you today about regional collaboration and how we develop a regional consensus within our cities. I wanted to also mention how proud I was of being reelected for my 5th term as mayor. And what's really interesting when we were reelected was that my party, all of my candidates for council and all of our candidates for school board were all reelected, and we now have a clean sweep, all of the people on council and school board. And what's really interesting is that's the 3rd time that this has happened. So for 3 consecutive elections, we've elected all of the elected officials within our city, which has allowed the provincial government to refer to us as the People's Republic of Burnaby. I am, though, very happy to be here today to talk to you about Metro Vancouver and what's happened in Metro Vancouver over the many years that I've been involved in that government. You know, it's interesting, is Metro government in British Columbia is a model that is being repeated all over the world. People are coming to our cities in order to find out what has been, as Craig referred to it, as the secret sauce. What's been the success of us being able to do such a good job of regional governance among our cities. And you'll know that across Canada there's been many models that have been tried, and certainly in Ontario and Quebec, the main thrust of how they dealt with this issue was amalgamations, bringing cities together, forced into amalgamations by the provincial governments. And it's my opinion, having looked at some of the statistics coming out of there, that most of the things they expected to be successful haven't occurred. They haven't reduced the cost of government, but what they've found is that there is much more a disconnect from the people within their communities, not having local governments to be able to refer to. It is so critical, I think, to be able to have governance at the lowest level that people are able to understand and relate to. And often I think you're finding in the very large amalgamated cities that it becomes very difficult for people to have their voice heard or to feel that they are actually participating. So we have looked in Metro Vancouver at a different model, one in which brings together 22 different municipalities in order to establish a regional governance structure. Now, I have got a clicker here that I will move on to, I think. I have no idea how this works. Do we have, right here? Yeah, green one. Good. All right, now, Metro Vancouver, a regional government body, is actually 23 local governments. It has 21 municipalities, 1 electoral area, and 1 First Nation as members. It formerly was known as the Greater Vancouver Regional District, which really is a mouthful. I'm very pleased that I had suggested at one of our meetings that we call ourselves Metro Vancouver, and subsequently it was voted that in fact we would change our name to Metro Vancouver. Unfortunately, the provincial governments never actually agreed with that and allowed us to make a legislative change. So we are doing business as the Metro Vancouver government, but we're still called for many purposes the Greater Vancouver Regional District. The whole regional district was created by legislation in 1967, but our core services go all the way back to 1914. Now, Metro Vancouver is bounded by Bowen Island on the west, the township of Langley on the east, the Coast Mountains on the north, and the Canada-US border on the south. So we have a very constrained area in the sense that geographically we can't grow out. And as a result, we've had to look at much more focused growth within our communities. We have a population of 2.4 million people, so we would be about 10 times bigger than Regina. And in fact, my city, with a population very similar to Regina, is 10% of the population of the Lower Mainland. We're at about 240,000 people. As I've said, it's a really compact area with population densities varying from the downtown core of Vancouver to more rural Richmond and Langley. The Metro Vancouver total budget in 2013 was $900 million. 70% was operating and 30% was capital. Now, when you look at our funding sources and the opportunities that we have to draw on funds, mainly the funds come from utility levies that are provided to each of the municipalities as charges for dealing with things like water and liquid waste, the disposal of garbage. We also have property taxes, but they're very minor charges on property taxes for our parks, planning, and air quality functions. So those functions are usually done for about $5 per household. It's a very small charge. And we have a completely self-supporting social housing wing of the government, which has developed social housing throughout our communities, and we have thousands of units that have been developed over the course of many years. Unfortunately, we haven't received funding for many years to be able to increase the number of units that we have, but we continue to manage those units very effectively, and they provide some relief from what is an incredible housing crunch in our communities. Now, as I said, the municipalities vary in size significantly, and you look at Burnaby right in the central part of the region, right beside Vancouver. You can get an idea. Most of you have probably been out to Vancouver, but as you look, is that most people end up in downtown Vancouver and don't get a chance to get out into the rest of the region. But you'll find that there are a great many very beautiful places in Metro Vancouver that are sometimes missed by tourists because it is such a diverse community and one that has so many different amenities. Now, the municipalities vary in size significantly. When you look at the top there, you can see Bowen Island, going all the way down to Langley and Langley City, all the way down to Tsawwassen First Nation, and across to the districts of North Vancouver, West Vancouver, and the city of North Vancouver on the North Shore. Now, when you talk about small, if you look at the little city over by the end of the inlet there, Belcarra has about 900 people, and they're one of the partners regionally. And 900 people wouldn't make a good high school in Vancouver. So there is a significant difference in the size of the units that are sitting at the table in Metro Vancouver. And as a result, there's a real disparity in the power of each of those municipalities in regard to how they handle their part of ensuring that regional government works. And you can see there some of the populations of the different parts of Metro Vancouver that make up the 2.4 million people that are part of our communities. Now, as I've said, it's important to remember that here in Metro Vancouver, we have 52% of the population of British Columbia. So more than half of the population of all of BC lives in one city. And that city itself is extremely powerful politically in regard to what is happening within our province, and has become a very important part of all of our economic development, despite having a very vital hinterland dealing in the resource industry. Now, Metro Vancouver, and there you can see a picture of all of my friends on the board of directors, and I don't think anybody's got their hands around anybody's neck there. But there are 38 directors on the 2014 board. Now let me tell you how this works for us, is that there are 38 directors on the board representing, as I've said, 21 municipalities, 1 electoral area, and 1 treaty First Nation. There are 4 legal entities: Greater Vancouver Regional District, the Greater Vancouver Water District, the Greater Vancouver Sewerage and Drainage District, and the Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation. So we're divided into 4 different entities. And what happens at meetings, for those of you who are interested in how we are able to get through an agenda, is you move from one directorship to another. So you participate depending on the function you're engaged in as a local municipality. So my city would be involved in all of the functions, but some cities might not be involved, for instance, in water or sewer. So they would not vote and not speak on issues that were related to that particular area. And the way that we deal with the size of communities is that we have a 1 vote per 20,000 residents. Now this is interesting because 1 vote per 20,000 residents gives a place, as I mentioned, like Belcarra, who have only 900 people, 1 vote. And as a result, Belcarra will be batting well above its weight in having 1 vote. They will be matching municipalities who might have 19,000 people and only have 1 vote, which means that small municipalities are given disproportionate power. Now, the board has in the past voted to look at a more proportional way of being able to have the votes placed between the municipalities, but the provincial government has preferred to remain with the 1 vote per 20,000 residents. And as a result, I think that probably the municipalities who are small really feel that they are at the table in order to be able to make decisions that allow them to bring a substantial ability to engaging all of the directors. The other thing that is interesting is that there is no, each individual director votes for the chair and the vice chair without proportional votes. So that means that anybody who is the chair or the vice chair must attract the individual votes of all of the members of the board in order to receive approval. So that means that it is not a question of weight in municipalities, but whether or not it's felt that the chair and the vice chair represent the interests of everyone at the table. It makes for interesting elections, but I think it makes it more reflective. Often you'll find that smaller municipalities' mayors might well be the chair of Metro Vancouver, and in fact right now a city of about 60 or 70,000, the chair of Metro Vancouver is the mayor of that city. So what happens is that if you get to 5 votes, that would be 100,000 residents, and if you move beyond that, you receive a second director. So the City of Vancouver has 7 directors because their population is 650,000 people. They have 7 directors. My city has 3 directors. Most cities involved in the organization have 1 director sitting at the table. There is also a director for the Tsawwassen First Nation and a director for the electoral area, and the electoral area represents UBC, and an amalgamation of other small areas throughout the Lower Mainland that haven't had a governance structure or been annexed into one of the municipalities. So there's a series of areas which are connected only through being part of the electoral area. Now, there is a committee system at Metro Vancouver. There are 12 standing committees, and each is responsible for a specific function. For example, there is the Zero Waste Committee, which is responsible for solid waste management programs. The Regional Planning and Agriculture Committee, the committee that I chair, responsible, of course, for regional planning. There is the Utilities Committee, and that provides advice on and recommendations to the board on water and liquid waste management programs. So there are a variety of committees. Of course, there's an Aboriginal Committee. There is a Committee on Environment. There are other committees that are chaired by different members of the Metro Vancouver Board, and those committees are very, very effective in bringing people together. The committee system allows people to have much more in-depth conversations about issues, and interestingly enough, there is a great deal of faith on the board in the committees. They believe if the committee has passed something, second-guessing that committee is something that should be discouraged. And so you'll find generally that committee decisions are approved by the board unanimously, and it is only on some occasions that issues will become important enough or of enough concern that there will be increased debate at the board and perhaps a change in the decision. Generally, though, the committee system develops a lot of respect among the elected representatives. Now, what we do and how we do it is that the Metro Vancouver mandate is that there is a service delivery. Obviously, drinking water, solid and liquid waste management are the types of services that we deliver. There's regional planning and regulation that takes in the regional growth strategy, air quality, issues that are common to all of us. But there's also an interesting thing that has been increased over the last years is the idea of political advocacy, that we're more powerful as a unit, that the cities coming together can develop the same power you would have in amalgamated cities by sticking together in regard to issues of importance to all of us. And so we find that we can have a bigger voice with the provincial government representing half the population of British Columbia. It doesn't mean that we're always successful in getting what we want, but it certainly means that our voice is going to be heard much more loudly. So the power that is given to a small municipality like Anmore or Belcarra is significantly greater than they could ever have alone. And as a result, having others take up those causes for you can make it much more effective for a small municipality to be involved in regional government. Now, we've been involved in the elements of service delivery and regional planning since 1967, since the inception of the organization. And those services that we're involved in that are, I think, extremely important to the way the region works. Of course, when you think about Metro Vancouver, is that we have a very significant water system supplying all of us with water throughout our communities, but coming from different sources, coming from the Seymour, the Capilano, and Coquitlam watersheds. If we all individually tried to tap those sheds and did so from the point of view of financing from each of our individual municipalities, it would be incredibly expensive. Getting together in order to make those functions work allows us all to receive those services at a much cheaper price. So what you find in the case of service delivery is that Metro Vancouver will be looking after all of the infrastructure it takes to clean our water and then delivering it to our doorstep, where then we control the pipes going through our city and the delivery of those services to our communities. So some cities will be metered and will have a metering system within their cities. Others will not and will pay bulk rates. But those are individual city decisions. They're not made by the regional government. The regional government performs its function, and that's delivering to your doorstep, charging you for what they do, and then allowing you to disseminate the water in the way you choose within your own city for the amount of money you choose. Additionally, if you choose to finance the expenses over a longer period of time or shorter period of time, that's up to your local municipality to do so, because you're financing it through the payment of your water rates. Now, it also becomes a very important political forum, and I think that's one of the issues that is often missed about regional government, the importance of regional government being able to increase power in regard to political advocacy. And we've felt over the course of many years that we have been extremely effective in getting our issue not only onto the table of the provincial government, but the federal government too. And so Metro Vancouver has become a very significant force in regard to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the lobbying that goes on for better infrastructure from our senior governments. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting, I talked a little bit about the core services, water, sewage, solid waste management, the idea that each of the cities will be taking its garbage to a transfer station that's held by Metro Vancouver and disposed of by Metro Vancouver. So we have a facility, a dump that is in Cache Creek, and our garbage is shipped from the Lower Mainland to a dump that's held in Cache Creek, except for garbage that goes to the Vancouver dump, which is in Delta, and to the incinerator, which is in the City of Burnaby. So our garbage is also now operated on a recycling system that is managed through a private sector organization instituted by the provincial government. And we're finding again that cities are able to market our recycling together as opposed to finding individual markets. Services that are provided directly to the public, obviously we have a very significant park system. And although we have our individual parks within our municipalities, we also have regional parks that have been acquired as a result of cities coming together to finance those parks. So for instance, in ecologically significant areas, the Burns Bog in Delta, we got together, obtained financing from the federal and provincial government, and then purchased that ecologically significant area together so that we were able to do more than Delta could have done alone to protect a place that all of us thought was important to our ecology. And of course, as I've mentioned, the housing, being able to be involved in housing, as many of you will know from local municipalities, it's impossible with our tax base to be able to get involved in any significant way in housing. But as a result of being together, we can promote more opportunities for housing and are able again to be advocates in finding ways to get other orders of government involved. We also provide labor relations services, 911 emergency services, and of course municipal borrowing. We borrow in British Columbia through the Municipal Finance Authority. I'm one of the trustees of the Municipal Finance Authority, and it has been an incredibly effective way of getting the lowest interest rates that we can for all of our municipalities, regardless of size. All of the local municipalities borrow through Metro Vancouver. So all of our 22 members would borrow money through Metro Vancouver as a member of the Municipal Finance Authority. With our AAA rating, it means that we're getting rates that are as good as the provincial government and close to the Government of Canada. That makes it a lot cheaper for people to be able to do their job with their communities. I don't know if there's a similar organization here in Saskatchewan, but I would certainly commend the idea of borrowing together as a way of us all looking at lower charges. For the City of Burnaby, we have no debt, and we have significant reserves. So we become a positive guarantor for all of the other municipalities throughout British Columbia. That means that our city is guaranteeing that the other cities will pay back their debts. That allows them, looking at our balance sheet, to be in a position where they are able to get absolutely the cheapest rates. So you can live in Spuzzum, British Columbia, take on an infrastructure project and get the same rate that you would get in the City of Burnaby or the City of Surrey. I think that's a very important element in the services that we're able to provide. Now, planning, policy, and regulation, big part of our job. Now, the three main areas of planning and regulatory responsibility are the regional growth plan, land use, through the municipalities, and transportation through an organization called TransLink, waste management, and air quality. All of these issues are incredibly important to a growing city, a city that has significant density and population. Being able to manage that is through what we call a suite of plans: a drinking water plan, a solid waste plan, a liquid waste plan, an air quality plan, a regional growth management plan, a housing plan, a parks and greenways plan, and an ecological health plan. So, as usual, as politicians, we're always planning and trying to find ways that we can put in place policies that will allow us to develop our communities in a responsible way over the next years. From a governance perspective, we work vertically. We're dealing with the province of British Columbia and the Government of Canada. Horizontally, we work with other regional districts, the Fraser Valley Regional District next to us, the Squamish Regional District on the other side. We work with other regional districts, and of course, we work with all of our communities on an ongoing basis. And we also work and become engaged with great many community groups within our city, and we found that Metro Vancouver now has become a forum for people who have an issue that isn't just directly related to an individual municipality, but one that crosses municipal borders. We become a forum for the discussion of those issues. So, for instance, intermunicipal business licensing, an area that can be very controversial for us in the sense that often businesses would have to get a license in each municipality. We've been able to come together and find a way that we are able to provide licenses that are issued in one municipality but respected in another municipality. And we found that we're making it much more convenient for our businesses, particularly those that are moving from place to place, making it much more easy for them to be able to do what they need to do and not pay excessive fees by having licensing in each community. So those kind of ideas are things that make a real difference to how people work. Of course, we're always working on our outreach and making sure that we are politically reaching out across our communities. We do community breakfasts, sustainability dialogues in which we bring people together. We have summits that are very important to ensuring that we bring together a lot of diverse interests within Metro Vancouver. We have a very extensive education program, moving from education in schools about recycling through to education for businesses in regard to how to become a part of the benefits of Metro Vancouver and to be able to bid on projects for Metro Vancouver. We establish networks. That is, that we bring together a lot of different, for instance, boards of trades and chambers of commerce to be able to discuss issues in forums. And we have become the central agency for international engagement for all of our cities. Many of us have sister city relationships, but Metro Vancouver has been able to escalate our involvement in international organizations. And as a result, many municipalities who wouldn't be able to participate in those kind of forums now can as representatives of Metro Vancouver. That adds a lot. If you're able to go to one of the world forums in order to look at issues of import to the whole region, your municipality is now participating far beyond anything it could have afforded individually. And I think that's a critical issue for smaller municipalities. While Vancouver can afford to do those things, you certainly aren't going to get an opportunity to participate if you're in Port Moody with a population of 50,000 people. But now in this system you can. It is a non-hierarchical system of local government, and I think that is one of the most important aspects of dealing with the issues, the important issues that we have. It means that everything that we do, the region must add value. It's not as if we are simply exerting power for power's sake. You have to argue that there is additional value being provided by the region becoming involved. And that means most of us are very hesitant to extend the region's powers. For instance, the region was approached to become involved in regional economic development and chose not to allow each of the municipalities to continue to do economic development on their own. because we were afraid that we would create another bureaucracy, and that that particular bureaucracy would likely begin to dictate where individual businesses should go within communities, as opposed to communities being competitive in bringing business into their communities. So it's been, issues come up all the time about whether or not we should expand into another area, and generally you find that we are very conscious of too much growth in regional government, as are many of our members. Decisions generally are made by consensus, and I think that's probably a surprise to many people. They think that, you know, you would look at simply the big cities consistently getting their way. That's not true, because all of us are interested in the region as a whole, and we often talk about bringing your regional hat to our discussions. So you take off your local hat. Last thing you want to be perceived as is simply being interested in parochial issues, that all you care about is what's happening in your city, because if you do, it's likely that others will respond in a way that's unfavorable when you do have a request that comes forward. So the more regional you think and the more regional you talk, the more likelihood there will be that other partners are going to agree with you when there's a need within your individual community, and it requires their cooperation. So it's all about, and it continues to be, all about relationships, as we all know politics are in our individual councils. You know, in councils, I know full well as a mayor that you can't do much if you don't have the support of your councillors. If you haven't convinced your councillors that this is the right direction to go, you're only one vote. Well, in the case of Metro government, no municipality can throw its weight around, including the City of Vancouver, because there are too many other votes that will likely go against them if in fact they're taking only a parochial interest. And I think that's been one of the reasons that we've been so successful. It means that we have a very coherent government, and I think that one of the things that makes the government so effective is the recognition that our municipalities are all very different. Municipalities have a personality. They have a reflection of the people who live in their communities. So I don't expect that West Vancouver, which is an area where people have a very high tax rate, where they have very little in the way of industries, where they're residentially oriented, where they have their own police force and pay a very significant part of their taxes for their own police force, will be the same as people who live in a rural community like the District of Langley, whose objectives may be entirely to expand into more commercial industrial development. As a result, you find that that difference in needs between the municipalities creates a very interesting dynamic, that cities are able to grow in the way they want to and reflect the interest of their citizens, and citizens are able to choose municipalities that best reflect their needs. So you'll find that people that want to be in a more urban environment will choose a place like the City of Burnaby, the City of Vancouver. People who want a more rural environment will move to a place like Delta. People who want to be in a situation where they're removed from some of the obligations of urban life will move to the North Shore. All of them provide different options for people to live, and all of them have particular benefits. And I think that's one of the things that makes the region so successful. It's the diversity. And of course, we are a very diverse region. That is, that 40% of the population of the Lower Mainland are immigrants coming from all over the world. We speak more than 100 languages, and people from Afghanistan to Zanzibar call us home. As a result, we bring together people that have a great diversity in cultural backgrounds and language, but we continue to be able to do that extremely successfully. In fact, so successfully that we've been a model around the world. The collaborative approach, as you can see, there's the dynamics, a working partnership, and there are the 23 different municipalities and how we operate. The 12 standing committees that are consistently looking at issues on an ongoing basis. I think I sit on 6 of those committees. There are lots of mayors who are involved in many of the committees. And additionally, just to mention, there is another organization that we all sit on called the Mayor's Council, and that Mayor's Council works with transportation and TransLink to be able to operate our transportation system. Again, collaborative approaches being taken. The municipal staff are also involved, and this is an interesting aspect of the way our operations happen, is that all of us have our municipal staff involved in shadow committees, the municipal advisory committees, that often will look at issues before they get to the board. So our staff are connected too, being able to sit down and talk about these issues that are coming before the board and to bring their opinions forward. And so for many of the people coming to the board, they'll not only have the reports that are coming from Metro Vancouver staff, but they'll have reports from their own staff about how this might affect their individual municipality, and that will be reflected in the debates that we have, how it might affect them. And we also, what's also interesting and something to mention is that you're probably learning more today about the Metro government than is often learned by councillors as they're newly elected. Most of them learn this by osmosis over the course of years, because the representatives that go to the Metro meetings are usually the mayor and the most senior councillors. Most councillors in individual municipalities are busy with their everyday work. They're not always interested in what's happening at Metro government unless the taxes go up. And so educating our members is very, very important. And we have what are called Council of Councils. And that brings together all of our councils from all over the Lower Mainland in meetings very similar to this, in which we talk about the individual projects that we're doing. We talk about how we want to approach policy issues. And it becomes an excellent forum for them to get more education about what we're doing and to ask questions about why we're doing it. That is a part of the program, I think, that has been incredibly effective and one that we keep looking to be able to get the wider level of discussion among councils that allow us to feel confident we're heading in the right direction. So our principles are that we are looking at a sustainable city, and that means that we are very much engaged in a strategic plan that uses the principles of sustainability in order to develop our region. The Sustainable Region Initiative was the plan that we utilized in order to begin this process. And the sustainability framework has become essentially the backbone of the way our programs operate. Every decision that we made is looked through the lens of sustainability. And most of you know the idea of the three-legged stool, the idea that sustainability is to create a harmony and a balance between our economic development, our social development, and our environmental responsibility. And creating that balance, ensuring that all of our decisions have that triple bottom line, is part of the way we form our strategic plans. And so it provides an organizational framework for everything that we're doing, and it provides an agreed set of policies that we're working from. Doing that means that everything that we do is going to look at all of those different aspects and going to treat them equally, which is incredibly important because oftentimes we found earlier in our process that we went off on a tangent saying, most important thing is the environment, and we forgot about the impact on business. Or the most important thing is economic development, but we forgot about the impact that would have on our social infrastructure. So achieving that balance is critical, and it's a place where we can all agree on. We can agree that those principles are important to all of our municipalities, and that has been incredibly effective in ensuring that we have a touchstone. We can keep going back to something and say, well, is this sustainable? Does it fit within the triple bottom line that we've posed? So our guiding principles in this: a vision for the region and the organization, management philosophy, and an organizational framework. Now, the history of our growth and our management is one that's really quite interesting. We have a very strong history. Regional planning started in 1949, and the first regional plan was adopted in 1960. Metro Vancouver 2040, which is our latest plan, was adopted in the summer of 2011 as the region's 5th regional plan. Just to go back, as 1948, there was a Lower Mainland Regional Planning Board established. In 19 1966, there was an official regional plan adopted. It was called Cities in a Sea of Green. In 1968, the GVRD took on the role of regional planning. And in 1980, there was an official regional plan that was utilized. And then in 1983, the provincial government stripped away our ability to do regional planning. Took it away from us and said that we weren't going to have it anymore. And then 1990, we got it back. And in 1996, we did the region's Livable Region Strategic Plan. And then in 2011, we did what is called Shaping Our Future, our regional growth strategy. So there has been a long and bumpy road for us to become involved in regional planning and to be successful in ensuring that regional planning worked within our communities. It was talked about a little earlier, but I've got to say that probably one of the most unique challenges I've had in my career was to be in a position of trying to bring together our municipalities for a unanimous agreement on a regional growth strategy. For those of you who have ever tried to work with other municipalities, you know the difficulty of coming to a unanimous agreement. It's hard enough to come to a majority vote. And we had to agree, all of us had to agree, that this plan, this ambitious plan, would be the way that we would govern our municipalities. So it's an interesting structure in the sense that we establish a regional growth strategy which is built off of the individual community plans of all of our cities. And often people think of this as being a top-down kind of situation, but actually it's a bottom-up. Each of the municipalities provides their aspirations to the Metro government, telling us what they see for their municipality in the future. In essence, what it becomes is an agreement between municipalities. All of us have agreed that it's in our best interest that I know what you're doing. And it's also in our best interest that you commit that that is what you're going to do, that I can expect that your promise has been made. So it's no different than agreements we make on an ongoing basis, for instance, with the private sector. It's no different than the agreements we make with our own citizens. It's simply agreeing between us that we're going to do the right thing. And when we agree to do the right thing, we agree to put in an enforcement mechanism to ensure you do, so that the next council will be obliged to follow the agreement that you in fact have made. That is the good part and the bad part of regional planning, in the sense that you bind future councils to a plan that you've adopted. That doesn't mean, though, that there isn't any way out of doing that plan. We do have mechanisms where you can come back to the Metro Board and say, we've changed our mind. We think that there is a good reason for us to do something different than what we did. And in that regard, there are ways that you can approach the board, but it requires a significant majority of the board to agree that changing the plan is in the best interests of us all. So you'll look at a 2/3 majority to be able to make any significant change to the plan. So there are outs, but those outs are difficult to attain, and they can't be done in a cavalier way. So it's very important for all of us to know, as we move into this, that our commitments are long-term, and that we are going to be in a position to believe what another municipality has told us, and we can make plans about the region that reflect what that municipality has committed to. And of course, here's our regional growth strategy statement: to promote human settlement that is socially, economically, and environmentally healthy, and that makes efficient use of our public facilities and services, land, and other resources. Pretty simple concept, but difficult to be able to apply. Now, when we guide our regional growth, we're looking at what's going to be happening in the future. And what is interesting, imagine this, is that we're expecting 1 million more people by 2040. Our growth continues to be exponential. 500,000 new jobs by 2040. So much like here in Saskatchewan, who is looking at record growth, we continue to have incredible growth in our individual municipalities and across the region. Our problem is different, though, than other municipalities, is we can't just grow out. We've got the ocean on one side, the mountains on the other, we've got the border, and then we've got gorgeous agricultural land that makes up a large part of our region. So we've had to make decisions that are much more like the decisions that are made in New York and London than they are cities in Canada. Usually, cities can expand, build another ring road, create some more spokes, build another ring road, and you keep expanding out. Not in our case. So it's not because we're better than anybody else. It's because we're constrained more than anybody else that we've been forced to make decisions to look at greater density, higher density, and a more cooperative framework than other municipalities across Canada have been able to achieve. Is that necessity is the mother of invention. And I think almost inevitably when you get to a point where all of us are facing those kind of issues, we begin to look for solutions, and those solutions mean you have to depend on your neighbor. So we were at a point that growth was going to catastrophically affect our ability to maintain our agricultural land, and so we had to do something that was going to allow us to accept this growth in a way that was much more environmentally acceptable. So the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy has been done by us having the ability to bring together a lot of communities in a single plan to be able to develop something that is a much more effective than any of us could ever have done individually. It creates a compact urban area. It supports a sustainable economy. It protects the environment and responds to climate change. It develops complete communities, and by complete communities, I mean that each community should be able to meet its own aspirations, and we should encourage each community to have a balance between residential development, jobs in their community, opportunities for recreation, facilities in their community. Complete communities means you don't have to go somewhere else in order to work. You don't have to go somewhere else in order to play. And so communities being complete is very important. And additionally is to find sustainable transportation so that we do not have all of the problems associated with a single occupant vehicle use, which is polluting communities like ours. And most of the effect of our pollution goes down the valley into the regional district right next door to us. So if we are in fact polluting in Vancouver, they suffer in the Fraser Valley as a result of that. So these motivations behind 2040 make it worthwhile for all of us to be able to do that. We want to contain growth, and you can see there the growth containment areas of our region, where we're trying to restrict growth to those gray areas so that we don't expand into those green areas. And that gives us a limited amount of land to be able to develop in, and certainly has a huge impact on the planning decisions for every single municipality. Some of us are in a position of looking after more farmland. Others of us are accepting greater density in order to protect the farmland. So for each of us, we have a role to play, an important role to play, and it's the ways in which we get together in order to make sure that each of us are doing what we expected that is really the important element of the regional growth strategy. We also want to integrate it with our transportation network, and you can see there the SkyTrain lines within our city and the major bus routes. So we're trying to feed transportation to all of those growth areas to ensure that people can get to other parts of the lower mainland without using a vehicle, and that is a very important element. It's very ambitious, it's very difficult, but it's a plan that is worth achieving because it does so much to enhance the livability of all of our communities at once. Those are the non-urban areas that we're protecting. You can see there all in green, which really are the lifeblood of having a community like this that is built on the Fraser River Delta with some of the best farmland anywhere in the world, and the obligation to somehow accommodate 3.5 million people, while at the same time we protect those values. That's a copy of our regional land use designations and how we've designated these different areas. And you'll see those big dots there, or the big boxes, are all the regional town centers, with small dots being sub-centers. Each of them are areas in which we are developing urban centers that have intensity of jobs and intensity of commercial services, and the rest of the areas are more developed for residential use. This allows you to try to achieve a balance so that we're not all going to a city center, to one city center, as used to happen. It was everybody going to downtown Vancouver for employment. We're trying to diversify that employment across the region and ensure that we're developing, again, those complete communities that have all of the aspects necessary. Now, this is an interesting part of how this operation works. In the sense, we agree on a strategy, and all of us adjust our community plans to meet that strategy. And then we commit to a regional context statement. And what that is, it's by saying how we're going to achieve the goals within our own communities. And that regional context statement must be consistent with the regional growth strategy. So we're in the process right now of going through regional context statements from our individual municipalities, and they're presenting them. We have received, I think, 14 of the 22 now and approved them. We have not approved 2 of them, and so we're in dispute on 2 of the plans where municipalities have already said, even though we signed that agreement in 2011, we don't like it anymore. And so we're going to be arguing with them about exactly how their plans fit. Most of the argument is, this is too a reflection of the regional growth strategy. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And we look for ways to be able to reach a compromise on how they're going to develop. During the process of the regional growth strategy, one of the interesting things we did was not everybody could commit to exactly how their community was going to grow. So we did have an option of study areas. And the study areas were places where municipalities said, we haven't decided, we don't know what we're going to do in this area of our city. We'd like an opportunity to do some more work, and we know we can't freeze it at this stage of development. And as a result, the study areas were given the ability to have a 50% vote at regional government instead of a 2/3 vote, which gave them an option later of being able to get a lower standard to look at those study areas. And that was one of the things that allowed us to achieve the degree of unanimity that we achieved at the end of the project. There had to be some safety valve for municipalities to be able to look at what they might do in the future. Of course, transportation absolutely critical to making all of this work. I can tell you that one of the great frustrations for us in Metro Vancouver was in 2000, we were given all of the transportation system by the provincial government to govern. The mayors became what was the board of an organization called TransLink, and we began planning our own transportation system to be able to coordinate with our growth strategy. Unfortunately, we made a decision at our board that didn't agree with the provincial government's view of where the next SkyTrain line should go, and the provincial government took it away from us, and we no longer have the ability to govern our own transportation system. They gave it to a private board, and the private board is now making decisions that are much more in tune with what the provincial government wants, but there's a massive disconnect between the cities and the transportation system now that we're trying desperately to repair. Most recently, 2 of the members of the Mayor's Council on Transportation, 2 of the members have gone on the board, the private board, and so there's been more or less a compromise that's being achieved in order to try to find a way around what has become a very thorny problem for all of us. It hasn't been a happy situation, and it continues to be really a great difficulty within our region to find any kind of solution for how we might develop it. There is a picture of our drinking water system. I know there'll be some technical people out there who are going to look at how we're distributing our water systems, but I can tell you that looking at the watersheds, the Coquitlam watershed on the far right of the screen, the Seymour in the center of the screen in the green area, and the Capilano, recently we spent $1 billion on the Seymour water filtration plant as a result of government requirements to lower from 5 NTUs to 1 NTU in regard to our water supply. And so that $1 billion expenditure could not have been made by any individual municipality. It had to be made by us as a group. And so that was a massive commitment. But one of the things that is really beneficial when you get that massive commitment is that you are able to go to both the provincial and federal governments as one voice, as a large city. So you have the weight of an amalgamated city together, and you're able to convince them that they should participate in these programs. And so we did receive some federal and some provincial monies in order to do that. It never is easy, as you know. I think every individual municipality knows it's not easy to get money out of the senior governments. And we say over and over again, in fact, this has become the mantra of local governments in Metro Vancouver, that out of each dollar that is paid in taxes, municipalities get 8 cents to be able to run everything that we do. And that statistic is one that we don't mind ensuring the public knows. When you think about it, is we're giving people clean water, and we're taking away their dirty water, we're collecting their garbage, we're providing fire service, police service, we're providing roads and infrastructure, we're involved in social housing, we're planning, we're building, we are doing parks and recreation, and we're doing that for 8 cents out of every tax dollar. That's an incredible accomplishment for local government, and it shows the value of local government. Often we ask the question, where does that other 92 cents go? And for many of us, that becomes an issue that frustrates us, because we would like to see more money coming into local government for infrastructure, but it continues to be different choices than we might be making individually. In fact, right now, we are again going through there's some of our facilities. It's pretty out there. Our liquid waste facilities, as we're now going through revamping our liquid waste facilities. And as you know, in most of these cases, these are all edicts that come from other orders of government, from the federal or provincial government. They tell us we must meet these standards. And then often there's no money in order to meet those standards. And so now we're going through a massive redevelopment of our liquid waste program, dealing with our sewage. And while in my area and in the eastern part of the area, the Anasis Treatment Center was redeveloped a number of years ago, we now have both the Vancouver sewage treatment and the North Shore sewage treatment to take on. And we're looking again at hundreds of millions of dollars of expenditures and seeking money from both the federal and provincial government to assist us. All of our lobbying efforts are being put in as a group to ensure that the money comes through. And even though our major project is going to affect the North Shore, West Vancouver, North Vancouver, we are lobbying as a group to ensure that money comes into the system, and we are assisting as a group to pay for the facilities that go in. So again, that cooperative approach is working, because neither of those municipalities could do it alone. If they were in a position of doing it alone, their water utility fees for their local residents would be $2,000 a year, just for each of those municipalities. Impossible for them to be able to do. So working communally has given us that option of being able to do it. We expect that over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to have to come up with $1.5 billion in sewage treatment facilities. And that's probably optimistic after just having spent $1 billion on water. Those are massive figures for any of us to be able to participate in. And those are some of our liquid waste facilities, an attractive addition to any community. These are our solid waste disposal facilities, and again, we work cooperatively. You can see the Vancouver landfill there in yellow. That's in Delta. And you can see the waste to energy facility with the white is in the City of Burnaby. We're burning 300,000 tons of garbage each year there. And then there are transfer facilities. Each of those small triangles is transfer facilities which move more garbage out of the Lower Mainland and take it to the interior where it's disposed of in a dump. And those are some of our waste disposal facilities. This is much prettier. These are our regional parks, and the City of Burnaby has a regional park, Burnaby Lake Regional Park. There are a large number of parks throughout our communities, and I think this is really one of the nicest aspects for all of the directors, that in communities that never could have afforded these parks, we got together and bought them and ensured that we retained very important ecological areas. And that has been, I think, one of the great accomplishments of the regional district, is protecting in the long term our ability to hold some of the most important areas. We also do the labor relations function, as I mentioned, and here's an issue in which where we broke up, is that we had a labor relations function and it was dysfunctional. We weren't able to come to any agreement. We found our municipalities were going off on their own, and while we were attempting to work together, it was frustrated. So what we did is we took all political involvement away from the labor relations function and handed it over to our bureaucrats and said that politicians were just messing it up, that we should stay out of it and let the bureaucrats come together in order to look at recommendations for our future labor settlements and for looking after other issues like job classification among the cities. It's one of the more frustrating areas because of the individual pressures that go on, and what we found is municipalities were breaking ranks and settling, and then they were setting trends, and we couldn't stop it from happening. Finally, we threw our hands up and said, this is an area where we really don't think that we're being very successful, and removed ourselves from it. So it shows you that one of the things that's interesting is that we understand also when we're not doing something well. And I think it's important to be able to recognize that. Being bloody-minded in the face of evidence that you're not doing a good job is the wrong thing to do regionally. And you find that there can be much more candid discussions when people get behind closed doors and say, so how are we doing? Not very well. Well, why don't we stop doing this? And that was an incredible change to make in the system. Challenges. Obviously, consensus can be hard to find and to maintain consensus. And you know, despite the fact that often all of our decisions are unanimous, is that it's because we work so hard to bring everybody inside the tent, to make sure that everybody's issues are dealt with. I don't think it makes us less effective, because it means that everybody gets a chance to tell us why they don't agree with the decision that's being made. And often a minor adjustment, a tweak, can make it easier for people to be able to adopt it. Obviously, people's parochial concerns come up and the pressures they have in their individual municipalities. I mean, after all, this is politics. And decisions get more difficult the closer you get to a local election. People are disinclined to do anything that might radically affect their own municipalities. And so parochial concerns can become very difficult. Again, you're always talking about putting aside parochial concerns in order to put on your regional hat and deal with what's good for the region. Obviously, all of us are jealous of our autonomy. You know, Burnaby was probably the city that had the most objections to the regional growth strategy. And I was the chair of the regional growth strategy. So you can imagine my consternation when my own city staff are telling us all the reasons we shouldn't do this. But we worked through all of the problems that they brought up, and we found solutions for many of the issues, and we continued to look at the other cities and say, we want you to have the degree of autonomy in your decision making, but we want you to come to the table and make a deal. And eventually all of those cities were prepared to do that, because politicians will eventually come to a deal if they're given the opportunity to be able to do so in a respectful way. Obviously, there's constant attention that needs to be paid to all of our internal issues. Finding out whether someone is unhappy is important to be able to resolve their problems. And oftentimes they can't articulate it, and we need to work at making sure that we're listening very, very carefully. There are obviously some small cities who feel that they are not getting their voice heard, and we have to make a very special effort to ensure that they're getting the opportunity to discuss their issues, even though their issues may affect only a couple of thousand people. I think that one of the things we worry about is that if there's a series of complex issues and there's an attitude of people feeling that you're not doing the right thing by them, that it can lead to us having a breakup, and it's like any good marriage, is that it requires a lot of communication in order to ensure the marriage stays strong. And if it appears you're not listening and if things aren't getting discussed, then you can arrive at a position where there's a breakup, and we don't want that to happen. In fact, I can tell you that in regard to regional parks, my city was so unhappy with the way regional parks were being managed and the amount of investment that was going in, is that we have opted to take our local park out of the regional system and to run it ourselves. And so there are instances where you throw up your hands and you say, it isn't working for me, but there are options to be able to do things that are alternative. And in our case, since we owned the park and had leased it to them, it was an option for us to take it back. And of course, it's always difficult to explain this complicated regional system and to make sure that the public understands it when you can't always get all of the politicians to understand it across the region. And remember, there's a couple hundred councillors in Metro Vancouver. If you can't get everybody there on side, then you've got a real difficulty in trying to persuade the residents of your community and the businesses that you're doing a good job. And one of the things we've found is it's really easy for politicians to point their fingers at Metro government and blame us for all their problems. I mean, you're in the middle of difficulties in your community and you say it's the boogeyman, it's the Metro government that's doing this. And we really work hard with municipalities to not have that happen. But when you look at our strengths, you look at what we're able to achieve, we remain incredibly committed to this model. This model works. It's one in which we maintain autonomy, but we give up only what's necessary to protect all of our interests, our regional interests, that we come to this contractual agreement that we're going to work together and commit to a better region because it's better for each of our communities. And so we've found it to be cost effective, which is really important to the taxpayer, doing things in a way that is going to allow the taxpayer to get the best value for their dollar. And that is always one of the critical elements in every decision we make, is the taxpayer getting what they need out of this? Are they getting value? And so that value assessment is important to all of us. And that's the way you keep municipalities together, is by having a very incisive view of what your cost-benefit analysis is and how your business cases are presented and whether or not everybody agrees at the end of it. And oftentimes you build, when you think about it, by having a business case examined in a small municipality where you may not have significant resources, having those bigger municipalities sit down and look at these issues gives you a lot of confidence that you've hit the right model. It means that there's a broad constituency of support, again, in bargaining and being able to deal with the federal and provincial government. It increases the ability for us to be able to do those jobs. It's inclusive, and we found with our First Nation coming involved is that other First Nations are looking at joining, and so we're setting a good example and one in which the others are looking to participate. So we are, of course, creating a more sustainable region, and that's good for everybody, for us to be more responsible. Great political leadership. I think all of us have taken on the role of being part of the regional model very seriously. There's a lot of coordination between us. And one of the most important things is we're listening to each other about what we're doing well. And just a brief example is that one of our smaller cities, Port Coquitlam, decided that they were going to move over to automated garbage collection. And they did that about 10 years ago, took on that experiment. Most of us looked at it as this was, not something that we wanted to get involved in. They were so successful that that model has now been repeated in every single municipality around the Lower Mainland. So we had a municipality of 60,000 people leading 2.4 million people. And those best practices, those examples of what you can do well, really is an important element of success for regional government. On the whole, having evaluated what we've done over the past 50 or 60 years, I think that we've created one of the most livable cities anywhere on the planet. And a lot of the credit for doing that goes back to regional cooperation and our ability to respect each other and to work together to make our region better. So On behalf of Metro Vancouver, I hope we're setting an example that others will be able to follow. And if we can be of any help in decisions that are being made in other regions, we want to do so. I've spoken at Calgary, I've spoken at Saskatoon, and now in Regina, because we believe that helping other cities to do the things that we've done and accomplished and telling them the realities of the decisions that we've made is crucial to a better Canada. And if each of us can do our part to give an opportunity for other cities to learn from each other, we want to do that. So on behalf of Metro Vancouver and the City of Burnaby, thank you very much for having me here today.